positions. Councilor Whitebreak had a concept on how we might discuss, and
So we've got several positions open. We held interviews, I don't have the exact date in front of me, but it was a few weeks ago, and unfortunately the timing was such that only 2 of the council members could make it. Nevertheless, it was an excellent discussion with different members of the public that were interested in these roles. So, you know, most of the members of council, one way or another, know most of these folks. I took notes, but I will not call these minutes by any means. There's 2 parts to this. The first part is if folks want background from those interviews, or if they feel comfortable knowing the members that have submitted their names. We can go through that. And then the second would be the process of how we vote on who we want. What I thought would be the nicest way is to mention each of the members of the public that submitted their name, and then come back and then, you know, for Pat Smith, be able to say, you know, if 3 people wanted Pat Smith, they'd say aye, and then, you know, Sandy Jones, same type of thing, and then when we had a majority, then we were done. That way we wouldn't be in a position to have to say yes or no on any particular one member, because there are a lot of good people, and I don't know if we want to say no to any of these people, but we certainly have to choose between some choices. So if that process works, I think that would be a nicer way to do this.
There's no need to provide negative votes, it's just a matter of positive votes,
Yeah.
the number of positive votes, majority.
trying to pull up your notes here, Bob.
I have it in front of me, and I printed out a copy, but I don't, again, since they're rough. But I asked for the members that weren't at the interviews what they would like for background or not.
That's good.
In your proposal, we're not going to discuss.
We can discuss them, absolutely.
Yeah, I think why
Let's
don't
hear
we
their
have
names and then discuss them.
each board, let's discuss the names that are at play. And we can offer our feedback from attending the interviews, and then we could close that discussion and go around to the vote.
And each person should come up with a vote, so it shouldn't be, if there are positive votes that would elect 3, but you didn't read 4, you should go the whole way, you need to go to 4, if there's another one, then you can go through again.
So we'll start with the more difficult one right off the bat, Planning Commission. We've got 5 members of the public that are submitting their names for 2 positions. David Brower, who served since 2004 at that spot. Jim Cornwell, I don't know when he started. I think he said he's been on it for 11 years. He might have been chair for 11 years. I'm not sure of that. So both of them are incumbents, so to speak, or on the board. Jeff Asay put his name in for both the Planning Commission as well as the Narberth IDA. Deborah Lonsdorf put her name in for the Planning Commission, as did Katie Skeen.
So if I have that correct, it's Brower, Cornwell, Asay, Skeen, Lonsdorf, and this one. That's it. That's right. 5 names for 2 positions.
Exactly.
Okay. Maybe you could give us well, Mr. Cornwell was just here, so I can put words in his mouth, which is that he has a desire to remain on the Planning Commission, to see through, he knocked on wood, the adoption of the form-based code that he has worked so hard on. And just in questioning him as to his goals would be for a fairly consistent Planning Commission who helped develop the code, to help steward it into adoption, and, you know, in the short period of time following it, any revisions, updates, modifications, to keep that continuity of knowledge. That you concur with that?
Yeah, that's what he seemed to say.
Dave Brower.
So, you know, one of the good things, I should also point out, one of the good things about these interviews, beyond helping us choose who to appoint, is we get feedback and knowledge and interest from these folks that are serious about being on these committees. So a lot of this is, you know, feedback that they're giving us. You know, Dave mentioned, we talked about how things changed since 2004. When we started serving, he said the change has been gradual. It's not the disaster scenario that we often talk about, but there is an erosion of some level over the last 11 years as far as the overall, you know, things that the form-based code is kind of addressing some of these buildings. The town was built out before the code came in place, and he felt the current code is arcane and difficult to read, and something that's a more user-friendly code is important. My favorite question that I asked him was, is the planning commission always right? You know, he recognized that the planning commission and the borough council have two different roles, and you know, it's important that they're able to look at this also as a 50-year timeline, so we have a community that will value that as well as now. He'd like to help us work with this building, the school on Sabine, the railroad station that's near the end of its life, and the whole station circle as projects going forward. He brings a design perspective and understanding of the built environment. He feels he has a good understanding of why Narberth works. We intuitively know if we like being in a place. The architect is trained to understand why a place is desirable, valuable. We talked about some of the dynamics of the planning commission. He liked the business sense of real estate that when Jason Duckworth was on the committee, he was able to bring. And so that was the gist of his conversation. It was a really good conversation. Jeff Asay, he said it was time for him to step up and volunteer some more time formally. He put his name for both committees. He felt the IDA was a less of a time commitment, and he feels he brings a balanced approach, an open-minded approach where he mentioned like the roundabout issue where he was initially opposed but is completely converted to the value of a roundabout. When we asked him what he loved about Narberth, he said a sense of community, accessible government, family-oriented activities, look and feel, livability but outside the big city. And Aaron put in the top question here, what is your Narberth dystopia? Which I scrambled to find out what dystopia meant. And no, I knew. I want to give you credit for
It's a $12 word.
Inflation has brought us to.
And his answer is, how much do we want to allow developers to dictate what new construction would look like? Do we allow people to comment, to come in and have tear downs? We need to be careful on how the housing stock is replaced, but at the same time respect individual property rights. He felt mistakes could be changing Narberth. There's too much density. I felt there was a parking shortage already, and there's different opinions on how many cars are the right amount, and you know, not to wait for the tipping point to occur. Deborah Lonsdorf, her perception of the Planning Commission is that they're advisory. They present with an issue, they research it, and then they present it to council. There's a lot of back and forth. She's got background on the Civic Association, Friends of Narberth History, and when asked what her dystopia was, she knew exactly what she was being asked for, but she had really not spent much time thinking about it. The good things about Narberth is the playground, you know, happy and revitalized, the new bridge development. She's always concerned that we could lose the character, you know, and doesn't want to see that happening with some of the tear downs and such. The one note she did make was that the Planning Commission should talk louder. And that the minutes were not so easy to come by, but discussions, good discussions happen, and just how to get those discussions presented to the public in a better way. Katie Skeen, who I can't help but mention was once a contestant on Jeopardy, which has nothing to do with this position. She got involved in the form-based code focus groups. She feels she now has more time to commit. Her skills were interesting. She enjoys reading dry materials. She was an English literature, 18th century architect researcher. She's a strong reader and word person. And so she feels precision in communication is important. Learn a lot out about people, so just want to make sure I'm not misstating what they said. It's really my concern as I read my
I
notes.
think you're doing a very good job.
Yeah. So we talked about the porch question. You know, it's all open, and I felt like she was able to use the word permutation, which is even better than dystopia, I think. But you know, so she thought that partially closed off permutations might be a solution. And then we asked if there's a skill set or point of view that's not currently on the Planning Commission. And nobody is representing the blue collar, dying-the-wool Nards. So she thought that was an area that needed representation. And then, are there any decisions that could take away the part of Narberth that you care about? And change will happen. Preserving the town would actually change the town. So, she tries to stay unemotional about these things. Narberth remains, it's important that Narberth remains community feel and differentiates itself. Keep Narberth different, not weird like Austin, but different. Not Marion or Penn Valley, that was really what she was saying. And she hopes that Narberth retains a community feel. She likes Sean's minutes and blogs.
She's so.
Yeah. She believes in open, transparent meetings. And she has concerns about some of the social media around these discussions. And that she felt the planning commission could work towards more public education on different issues. So those are the 5 names and some of the comments that they gave us when we got to interview them. And it was a pleasure to interview all of them. So
Of those 5 fine citizens, do you have a recommendation?
we don't, because we're not a committee to do that. I can give you my personal, the challenge I had personally, or I still have because I haven't voted yet, is whether to add fresh people or not. I mean, the Plan Commission is doing a terrific job. I have differences of opinion with them, but the quality of their work product, and their discussions and how they approach things, I have not one bad thing to say. But the question really is, to me, do we put 1 or 2 new people on there or not? That's a decision I'm toying. I'm fighting back and forth as we speak, but that's my thoughts.
I am going to concur with Mr. Redgrave.
I'd like to speak. We increased the number of members of the Planning Commission 3 years ago so that we would have a greater representation of this community on the Planning Commission. And this is the only year in particular where we have 2 members rotating out. And we will have an additional member each year. There may be one other year where we have 2 members that roll out. I don't know that we would not re-up or not approve a sitting member who gave as much as these 2 members have given to any other board or commission. I mean, if you took 2 really fine, competent neighbors, members of our community, on the Public Service Commission, on the rec board, on the library board, and then just didn't reappoint them when they're actively interested in being reappointed, I think that there would be a kind of, that in itself in some ways unsettles the cohesion of this community. 9 years, 11 years in this community is not a long time, as evidenced by the fact that we have neighbors in this room who've been here almost 40 years, maybe more, and families who've lived in this community 90 years. These 2 individuals who have just asked to be reappointed have given almost 2 meetings a month for the last 5 years, and they're asking to be reappointed, and they have the competency to do the job well. So I mean, I could say a lot more, but I don't know that we would reflect much on this if it were any one of the other boards or commissions.
I don't have a lot of comments on it. I'll actually defer to you.
Thank you, Mr. Westport, for your statement. I differ a little, only in the sense that I want all of us, everyone, the public, everyone, to be careful who's included and who isn't. I don't want to become a place where new voices are shut out. So, in the words of Boy George,
Why do you look at him when you say
it's an insider. So, in the words of time ain't nothing but time. So it's an illusion. But I think that there are new voices that have an opportunity to bring something. But I also agree that in this particular time, these 2 appointments are critical to what we're trying to do on a lot of levels. And it wasn't until you read what Mr. Brower had said about some of the projects going ahead that I and I agree with what you said, I'm in the same sort of position of like, how are we gonna make this work? I had wanted some change, and I am conflicted, and I think your points are valid that we wouldn't maybe review all of this so closely if we weren't in certain positions with this board. So that's.
So,
I want to add one other thing, is that each of the other three candidates are fine people.
Yes, exactly.
And I believe we have opportunities for
Yeah.
them to be appointed in other boards and commissions
Right.
sooner rather than later. And each and every year, another appointment will come up on the planning commission.
Right.
If it's really about the planning commission.
Right.
Many opportunities will happen.
Charlie, do you have anything to add?
You know, I'm just thinking about where we are with the form zoning code. And it's still in its final stage of the comment. I think it's likely to come up in some final state for final consideration by us next year sometime. And you've got a couple people who are interested in staying on who've been instrumental in the very long slog through a lot of gory detail to put that code together. You know, two things. One, you know, given their commitment to date to the process, I would want to give them the opportunity to see that through. It's a huge multi-year project. Both people, incumbents, have had a pretty strong role in it over time. I think it takes it to conclusion. And then two, you know, once that project is complete, you know, I'm sure there are folks on the commission who will look at that as kind of a checkpoint. And I'm just sort of guessing the future here is you might see folks who've been incumbents for a long time, once they've got the sort of biggest project the board